Today, I am here with my good friend Tim Mush from Market Sharp, actually the creator of Market Sharp. Let's not forget that. And we have people from all over the country. I see, wow, I even see Canada. I see Illinois, San Jose, Georgia, Vermont, Alabama. Awesome. Okay, cool. So today we are going to talk about planning for 2022. We are going to talk about how success leaves clues and those clues lead to shortcuts. So my name is Brian Kaskavalciyan. With me is Tim Mush. And so Tim, let's do this. So for I can't imagine anybody doesn't know who you are, but for those that may not, why don't you tell everybody real quick who you are, and I guess maybe I'll do the same.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'm Tim from Market Sharp and also from Improvement 360 and a company called RoofSnap, for those of you in the roofing business. And I've been doing this for a while. Brian mentioned that I originally created the first version of Market Sharp way back. And of course, it's been through a few iterations since then. So Market Sharp is a CRM program used by many of the country's best remodelers and home improvement professionals. So certainly happy to be here. You know, one thing, Brian, when we started talking about what we're going to do content-wise, and you mentioned this concept of success leaves clues and so forth and shortcuts, I thought to myself immediately, wait a minute. I've heard for my whole life, there are no shortcuts to success.
Yes, good
and
point.
I thought, well, what's this about? But then after I thought about it a while, there are certainly shortcuts to success.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to talk about here today. And we're talking about things like not reinventing wheels and all that stuff. Other people have done this stuff, and we can learn a ton from them. And hopefully that's what we're going to present today, Brian.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Tim. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's funny, as I was thinking through this, and I wrote this a month or two ago, I wrote this concept of, those clues lead shortcuts. That was my initial thought too, was, well, wait a minute. We have been taught forever that shortcuts are bad. But the one thing that you and I both know, and as we get into the content, we'll see that, is you are absolutely right that there are, proven models to follow, and there are shortcuts that we can take. One of them being Market Sharp, right? Because before Market Sharp, if you wanted a CRM system, you had to go create your own, right? But
You're
now,
right.
What a huge shortcut, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of money. So so shortcuts can be a good thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. So for those of you that don't know who I am, again, my name is Brian Kaskavalciyan. I founded a company called G4 Marketing Group. We work with a couple hundred companies around the country with what we call relationship marketing, taking care of the customer after that job is done, getting reviews, referrals, and repeat business. I also am the host of the Wealthy Contractor podcast, where we interview successful contractors and we learn about their success and in many cases, the tough road to success. And we learn a lot about shortcuts. And so we're going to present some of the things that I've learned by listening to some of the most successful people in the business. Same with Tim. Tim and I both are real students of what does it take to be successful in this business. And our jobs really are to bring that information to you guys. And so that's what we're going to try our best to do here. All right, so let's get started. Let's go. So we are also going to talk to you about an event that is happening February 15th and 16th here in South Florida called Accelerate Live. And we'll give you an opportunity to grab your seats at discounted pricing. But before we get into that, let's get into what we are going to cover today. So over the next hour or so, we are going to talk about 2022 and talk about planning. We're going to talk about some of these clues and some of the shortcuts that they lead to. We'll talk about, in terms of shortcuts, we'll talk about profit, we'll talk about pricing, marketing and sales, and we'll talk about technology. We'll also give you, and we'll quickly go through a couple of planning tools that you could use to think about 2022. We'll talk about Accelerate Live and the opportunity there for you. So let's jump into this. So big question. As you are planning for 2022, what do you want? How are you planning for 2022? So what a lot of people do with this is they think in terms of revenue, in terms of volume. I want to sell some millions of dollars next year. And they plan around that. Okay. So this year we did 3 million. Next year we want to do 3.5, 4, 5, 20, whatever the number is. And Tim and I have been in the business long enough to know that revenue planning is important, but we've come to learn that what's more important is, what do you want to make? That means, how much money do you want to make out of the business? So what people do here, and I have these conversations, by the way, all the time with people, all the time, especially this time of year. So planning usually goes something like this, how much revenue do you want to do next year? We want to do or what do you want for next year? I'm sorry, not how much revenue. What do you want for next year? Well, we want to do 5 million. I'm just making up numbers. Okay, great. What'd you do this year? 3.5. Now, these are much more complicated conversations, obviously, but I'm just kind of giving you some highlights. How much did you make on the 3.5 million? Well, and usually anytime an answer starts with the word well, not a great answer is coming. Well, Brian, this and that happened, and we did okay. We made about $150,000 in profit on $3.5 million. Like, okay. And so now next year, why do you want to go to 5? Well, because if we do more, then we could, get our profitability where it needs to be. Well, how much money do you want to make? That stops people a lot of the time, doesn't it, Tim?
No, it really does. And I'm with you. I think when people consider planning and so forth, they jump right to, yeah, let's do this amount of revenue. And really, I think what more and more business owners in our industry are realizing is you got to go much deeper than that. You got to ask yourself the question that you asked a couple of slides ago, Brian. What do I want out of this business? And really what you don't want revenue. What you want is what revenue and profits give you in terms of your quality of life and maybe some other things that for many people we don't consider. So I think maybe you're going to touch on that in a little bit, is going, elaborate a little bit more about what you want out of your business. And certainly revenue is a path to get there.
Yeah.
But you got to think it through a little farther than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I'll always ask people, well, okay, so, you made 150,000 on 3.5 million. Well, how much money do you want to make? And they'll say, again, I'm just going to make up a number, $300,000. And I'll say, well, but you don't need a $5 million business to do $300,000. And this is like one of those, head pop moments. Well, what do you mean? Well, you don't need a $5 million business. You just need a really well-run business that you've got right now. If you've got a $3.5 million business, you're only making $150,000. Sorry, but you're not doing it right. Why don't we figure out how to do this one right? Make 450,000 or 400,000 on your $3.5 million business, which is that's not even the right number. And then let's, figure out where we want to go next. So my point here is, what are you going to be focused on for 2022? Are you focused on how much you're going to sell, how much you're going to install, or how much money you want to make? And it's my contention that you start with how much money you want to make and why you want to make that number. Okay. The other thing is, are you planning for time away from your business? Right? Because you got to rest. You got to relax. You got to recharge, especially after the year that we've had this year, and then of course from last year, the leftovers from last year, and then are you pursuing any other interests besides your business? Now, look, this is something that admittedly, I got to work on, what else am I going to do besides just this, what I'm doing here? And then you got to ask yourself, why? Why do I want to make that much money? What am I going to do with it? What is it leading to? Okay. So for some of us that are older, I'm 53. So when I think about why do I want to make money? Well, because, how many more active years do I really have? I want to have enough money put away and working passively for me so that there comes a time where I don't need to work as hard, right? When you're in your 30s and when I was 30 and I was just married and had kids, the wants and the whys were very different. And so I would just say to you, really think about, well, why do I want that? Now, the one thing that we know, and I'll say this from doing this for such a long time, is ultimately your why is going to come down to freedom, right? That's why we got into business for ourselves in the first place. We didn't want anybody telling us what we were worth. We didn't want anybody telling us where to go and what to do. And we thought, hey, I could do this better myself. And so we set out to start companies with the hope of getting freedom. Now, our freedom comes in different forms, whether it's wealth and security and independence, autonomy. Autonomy is, for me, is very important. Independence is important, obviously wealth and security. And I would imagine for you as well. But what happens is a lot of the time is the business has a dangerous tendency of taking on a life of its own, and it will suck you in and it will take over your life if you allow it to. And so that's why I think it's really important that we all understand that really the business is just a vehicle. It's a vehicle for getting us where we want to go. And what's interesting is, as we were talking a minute ago about revenue versus profit, what's really interesting is revenue is very logical. It's a very logical construct. It's like, okay, well, I could sell, whatever the numbers. And the numbers don't matter, by the way. All the principles are exactly the same. Whether you want to make, sell $1 million a year, $5 million a year, $20 million a year, some of the things, the way it happens is different, but the underlying principles are all the same. Whether you want to make 200,000 a year, 500,000 a year, 2 million a year, or 20 million a year, the underlying principles are the same, right? But the business itself is only a vehicle. And what happens is revenue, again, is very logical. But when we bring it down to profitability, what am I actually going to take home? That's where emotion gets into it. That's where the head trash starts to come in. And that's where a lot of us get bogged down. And that's part of the reason. And again, we don't have time to go through all of this here today, but what you think and what you believe is really what's going to drive that bottom line number. And so to me, where the real work is in that thinking and in those belief systems. And that is really what's going, because the skill sets and the shortcuts, we're going to show you what those are right now. Those are relatively straightforward. They're not easy. They're simple. They're not easy, but they're really relatively straightforward in terms of how you get the results. But it's really up to you to say, okay, what type of business do I want? Do I want a high performance machine like what we have on the screen? Or do we want something that is, or do we end up with something that's just a puttering mess? And unfortunately, there are way too many businesses, period. Let's not even say in this industry, just businesses, period, that are puttering messes. And so, the big question becomes, how do we design, create our business to deliver the money and the time that we need in order to achieve the freedom we desire or we want, right? And so there are some ways to do this. And we're going to show you a couple of tools to think your way through it and do some of the planning. But we're also going to talk about some practical ways of how we make that happen. Now, when we talk about these things, there's kind of the proverbial, fork in the road, right? So you could choose one of two paths. You could choose this path, which, by the way, I did for a very, very long time. It's, Tim's laughing because, you probably did the same, right? It's, banging your head against the wall and just trying to figure everything out on your own. Let's try and, we got to reinvent the wheel every single time. Everything, we got to go figure this out ourselves. Well, that's one model. The other model is we can go focus on, well, what are some of the proven formulas? What are the most successful people doing? And how do we go model that? Instead of trying to figure everything out on our own, how do we go and model success? How do we replicate success, right? And so what's kind of cool, and Tim knows this as good as anybody out there, the business is very predictable. There are certain levels of the business. And Tim, I may have the numbers. I think they're pretty close, but there are certain break points of the business. There are certain points that you come to in the business where decisions need to be made, where a new level of not just business skill and business tactics and strategies change, but you, my friend, as the owner of the business, you need to change in here. And so there, these levels, we're not going to go too deep into the different levels, but you've probably come across some of these depending on where you are in your business. So one of the first break point is somewhere in that $1 million to $1.3 million range, because that's about the most that one person can do, you, the owner, as the salesman, right? Out there selling every day, and then trying to run the business as well. You basically have two full-time jobs. And the business breaks at about $1 million, $1.3 million. That's where people kind of you hear the word, I'm stuck, that's a stuck point. And in order to get from there to the next level, which is at about 2.5 million, the next level, 2.5 to 3 million, things have to change. Right? There's certain but there's certain things that need to be brought into the business, like a selling system and salespeople, in order for you to get to that next level, which is about that 2.5, 3 million. And then it just kind of goes up from there. But what happens is, again, you think of these as like a ceiling that you hit. It's a break point, right? And two things have to change. Again, your tactics and your strategies have to change, the skill set within the business have to change, but also your mindset as an owner needs to change. Any comment about this, Tim?
No, that's just dead on, because I see that over and over again. I see people getting to that plateau, so to speak, and not moving, because just as you said, Brian, the skills that got you to that point are now running out of gas.
Yeah.
And there are other skills and other mindsets, which is just as important as the skills, that's going to propel you into the next level. What I see, Brian, in this industry over and over and over again, it seems like the bulk of the companies can make their way into that $2-3 million range. A lot of companies can get there, but I'll tell you what, that's where so many get stuck.
Yeah.
And that's where, in order to get to that next level and break through, that's where you really need, first off, the proper mindset, but then secondly, the proper systems and processes to move you along. You can get to a certain point by pretty much winging it, but you can't get beyond that point with winging it. So yeah, good stuff.
And what's the most, I guess I would say, unfortunate thing about that is that when companies and Tim, remind me again, when did you first create Market Sharp?
Gosh, Brian, that was before the letters CRM were ever put together.
Yep.
And that was in about 1991 is the first systems that we delivered to a dealer, 1991. So, oh my gosh, it's 30 years ago.
30 years ago. So I just want to say to everybody that's here listening to this, this man has 30 years of experience under the hood of thousands of home improvement companies. I mean, literally thousands. And he has seen these patterns over and over and over and over and over. I could say over 100 times, right? So I'll go back to what I was saying that's kind of unfortunate about that group that you described. They are the hardest working people you'll ever meet. And yet, what's happened is that hard work has gotten in the way of them really, really having the success that they deserve. And a lot of it is mindset. A lot of times they're not making the money, and I may be talking to you. And by the way, I was one of these people. Okay. In fact, I did it so wrong that I ended up losing everything at 40 years old. And that's part of the reason why I do this, is because I don't want anybody to make the same mistakes that I did. But that mindset is so important, of that we have to create that good foundation at $2 or $3 million so that we can go to the next level if that's what we want. Because look, I say this all the time, and Tim will attest to this. You do not need to have a $10 million a year business to get rich from this business. You can get very wealthy and do very, very well on a $4 or $5 million business. You can do very, very well if it's done properly. So, because the business is so predictable, that's where we come up with this idea of, and by the way, we didn't make this up. I don't know who first did, but it's absolutely right. Success leaves clues, right? And those clues we can develop to shortcuts, right? And those shortcuts we can use to shortcut our success, right? Now, what happens is, and especially lately, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's in the way, right? Because in order for us to move past and kind of go to the next level, we have to be, we got to say, hey, what's in our way right now? What is standing in our way right now? So we all know, and we're probably all sick and tired of talking about it and hearing about it, supply chain and labor, right? These are two huge issues that the industry is dealing with right now. But aside from that, what are some of the issues that you are dealing with that need to be overcome next year? Okay. Is profitability one of them? Right. steady, consistent lead flow. Okay. These are the biggies of this business, right? This business, if designed properly, and again, we're going to show you some of this, but designed properly becomes a lead business, So if you've got your profit model set up and you've got your pricing model set up, this becomes all about, and selling model, this becomes all about leads, right? Getting a consistent flow of leads. It's also about getting consistent sales results and then being able to deliver quality work, so that we're not just creating satisfied customers, we're really creating raving fans that are going to drive 5-star reviews, referrals, repeat business, right? So these are the basics. These are the fundamentals of the business. But let's talk about this year, 2021. Now, I don't know about you guys, okay? But I made a list, okay? And Tim and I talked about this yesterday, and he added a couple things to it, okay? So what's going on right now for you? Because the mental block is a lot more powerful than the slide before. Because the slide before, we're gonna help you with that. We're gonna show you some of these models, right? But I really want you to think about what might be some of the mental blocks that are in your way right now? And how are you going to overcome those? So uneasiness, right? And Tim, jump in here on any of these that you want. Here's a list. I don't know about you guys, but before this whole thing started, I was in a fortunate position where my business really didn't need me that much. And even over this last year, it hasn't needed me that much. But I find myself working more than ever. I find myself with more mental fatigue than I've had in a really long time. And there is this kind of uneasiness about what's happening. What does next year look like? What does the next couple of years look like? So any thoughts on any of this, Tim?
Yeah, I do. Specifically that one, that word uneasiness. Because I've been at a number of events, a couple last week, and there's some very successful people there. Actually business owners making over $1 million a year in profit, things such as that. And I can tell you, that's the feeling I got from many of the people at these events. I mean, they're ecstatic that homeowners want to buy all sorts of stuff right now. They're happy about that. But there's just this underlying feeling of uneasiness that many people have, because we've never been through what we've been through for the past 1.5 or 2 years. I mean, certainly we've had ups and downs in the economy and all that kind of stuff, and many of us have experienced that. But it's been a little different. So uneasiness is definitely on people's minds, even though their business is rocking right now in terms of sales. So it's something that needs to be dealt with. And I think the reality is we don't really know what's coming yet. I think every time I've ever experienced like a boom in the business, like we've had recently, every single time it's followed with the reverse. And I have no reason to think that isn't going to happen here either. It's going to happen. A little different maybe, because we got so much work now and we got to get it installed and all that. But here's the deal. It really doesn't matter, what the future holds if we can't predict it. What matters is, are we prepared for what's next?
Yeah.
And we can prepare for it regardless of what it is. The bad part is, what you don't want to do is stick your head in the sand and continue to think, man, this is going to last forever, because that'll get you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's killed a lot of companies, hasn't it? That false sense of security, that, oh, this is going to go on indefinitely. And, we see a lot of people, this idea of having measured growth, people are growing by leaps and bounds over the last couple of years, which is great, fantastic. But you got to make sure that the underlying foundation of the business is sound.
Yes.
That the economics of the business are sound. What a lot of companies will do in these times is they start to take on a lot of additional overhead. And I think a lot of us, me included, have had to take on additional overhead, particularly in the areas of labor over the last year or so. And you got to be careful. But I think at the end of the day, we got to be, like Tim said, you got to be prepared. Have the fundamentals there, and you really got to be focused on, and this is an area where I do most of my work, is really in the areas of customer experience and customer relationships. The one thing that will kill you in the future is if you just go out there and just get as much work done as you can right now, but in your trail, you're leaving, marginally satisfied or even just satisfied customers. If you're not developing a relationship with these customers now, while things are good, when this eventually turns, and we don't know what that's going to look like, but this is not sustainable. It's going to turn. You will be in a much better position because you will have those relationships. You will have those fundamentals in place, like profitability, like pricing, like a marketing and selling model that works, so you can adjust as needed. All right, so we have somebody raised a hand. By the way, anybody that's got a question, I saw somebody raise the hand. You can just go into the Q&A box, and Tim and I will make sure that we handle any questions that you've got. So either go in the Q&A box, or I think you can go in the chat box, and Valerie is monitoring that for me. Okay, for us, I should say. All right, I'm going to close that out. All right, let's go on here. Okay, so some of the clues that we're going to share with you, and some of the shortcuts that we're going to share with you, these are things that, Tim and I haven't made these up. This is through very careful observation. This is through a lot of digging, a lot of conversation, and a lot of actually being behind the scenes of some really great companies and some really great operators. I put just a few up here on the screen. My buddy John Anglis has got a very successful company in Connecticut called Carefree Home Pros. By the way, John doesn't even live in Connecticut anymore. He lives in Florida, and his business is operating very, very, by the way, every one of these people that's up here runs a very profitable business. Tim and I don't like to share concepts and ideas from people that aren't making money, right? You got to be making money. Okay, those are the clues that we're going to follow. Charlie Gundel, been a friend of mine for a very, very long time, runs a super, super successful RBA out of Orange County. Mark Curry, again, dear friend of mine, runs a kitchen company throughout the Northeast. Scott Berman, again, another good friend of mine here in Florida, runs a very successful window company, window and door company, has a number of offices throughout Florida. And then, of course, I think a lot of people know Brian Gottlieb. He does a lot of speaking. He's a great speaker. But he has built, in the last 10 years, he's built one of the largest and most successful home improvement companies, I think, ever, ever. And so these are some good people to learn from. So what are we going to learn from them? So first, every single one of those people is very focused on profitability. They have a plan for achieving their profit targets. All right. Now, one thing that I say all the time is today, 10% net profit after everything is paid, including yourself, is the bottom. Consider that break even. In fact, today, if you consider inflation and what's going on with inflation, even 10% is not really 10%, right? But that should be your bottom threshold. But your ideal should be between 15 and 20%, your ideal, okay? And so when we think about profitability, okay, and this is a great line. I don't know where it came from, but I've used it for a long time. Profit is not something to add at the end. It is something you plan for in the beginning. And so that's why at the beginning, when we started to talk about this, we asked the question, what do you want? How much money do you want to make? You know, and then think about how much revenue you need to do in order to make that happen. And again, we're going to show you a tool for this in a minute, but that's the type of thinking that you want to have, especially if you're, you know, under $10 million in sales. Okay. It's especially important when you're in that $2 to $3 million range, like what Tim was saying. So profitability. So number one, you've got to have a very intimate understanding of what is profit. You know, a lot of people, it's incredible how a lot of people don't understand what profit really is. So when we talk about profit, again, let's be clear. Profit is what's left over after everything and everybody is paid, including you, for the work that you do in your business. This is money that you should be able to, however you do it, monthly, quarterly, annually, take out of your business, out, and move home. Okay, I say it all the time to people. Are you taking your money home? If it's staying in the business, Tim, this is nuts. So in our, you know, I have a mastermind group. I've got 12 great companies, company owners in our Wealthy Contractor Mastermind group. In our meeting, not our last meeting, but the one before, we were talking, obviously, I always talk about profitability. I don't care how much you sell. I want to know how much you make, right? And I want to know how much you're taking out and taking home. One of the people in the group said they had some ungodly number of amount of money in the business, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the business. And I said, well, why is it in the business? Why aren't you taking it home? And they had this like mental block of, well, but I need it in the business. And I'm like, well, why do you need it in the business for? Well, because of this and that. Well, I said, okay, well, keep 3 months of overhead in the business, right? Have some number that you're comfortable with, but the rest of it, take it out. Why is it sitting in the business? And I had to like twist arms, send text messages. I had finally one of the people in the group, like I went around the group, out of 12 of them, half of them were sitting on a whole bunch of cash in the business. I'm like, why is the cash in the, why aren't you taking it out and moving it out and investing it? And I mean, it was the craziest thing. It's kind of like that mental block. It's like, it's emotional. It's like, well, but wait a minute, I'm selling all of this and I've got money in the business. Anyway, my point here is profit is what you can remove and take out of the business. One of them, this is funny. I was on him at that meeting. And then at our next meeting, I'm like, okay, did you take the money out? No. I'm like, well, what are you doing? When he got home from the meeting, he sent me a text, a picture of the check that he took out of the business. It was hundreds of thousands made out to his name in the business. I'm like, you guys are all S corporations and LLCs. You're getting taxed on this money anyway. Take the damn money out. Anyway, so that's what profit is. All right. And I know I'm beating that up, but people just, it just blows my mind how people just, even when they make the money, they don't take it. They leave it in the business, and I don't understand why. So,
You know, Brian,
yeah, tell me.
a number of years ago, you introduced me to a gentleman. I think he spoke at one of your first conferences, a gentleman by the name of Mike Michalowicz, and he wrote a book called Profit First.
Yeah.
And without getting into the book itself, I think the title of the book just says everything.
It does.
It has to be first consideration. And you mentioned something just a minute ago that I see over and over and over again in this business. A lot of people have this inaccurate view of profit. You mentioned something a bit ago. Profit is what you have when you pay all your costs. And here's the kicker, including yourself.
Right.
Many companies don't think of it that way. They think, no, if there's anything left over, that's what I'll take.
Yeah.
And they don't put themselves in the budget and have their pricing handle that to the point where the business itself can make money on top of paying themselves. That just runs rampant in our business and industry, and it's got to stop.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow, Tim, I just noticed we're at 12:45 already. So everybody, we might go over a little bit, but hopefully this is of value to you. Let us know if it is. Go into the chat box and just give us a yes, or give us a little emoji, or give us something that says, yeah, this is good information so far, and you want us to keep going. Now, when it comes to profitability, you got to understand the economics of this business. There are structures for 15% net. There are structures for a 20% net. And you design your business around those structures. In order to make this happen, you've got to understand gross margin. You've got to understand your marketing costs, your selling costs, and your overhead costs. Now, by the way, one thing that I've had quite a few conversations about is, okay, good. We're getting good stuff in the chat, Tim. Not sure if you're looking at that or not. All right. See, and so somebody just said in the chat, I don't want to call you out, but you sent it to everybody, so you called yourself out. So somebody said we strive for 40 to 60% profit margin always. What you're talking about is gross margin. You're not talking about net margin. And 40% is not good. I'm sorry. 60% is where you want to be, which is kind of going to be the next slide. But what I want to caution everybody on here is that when you are creating your budgeting for next year and factoring in your net profit margin, you have got to increase, or at least prepare yourself for an increase in lead costs, because lead costs are going to go up as the market contracts a little bit. Lead costs are going to go up pretty dramatically. And if you're only at, I was talking with somebody the other day that's at 3 or 4% of gross, and I said, hey, look, whether you do it or not, design your business around 10%. Okay, that's a huge jump for them. But I said, design it around 10, because if you're at 3 or 4% now and lead costs start to go up, and you're not prepared, what's going to happen? They're going to eat into your net margin. And again, this is where you have to understand the economics of the business. We can't go over it all in detail, as much detail as we'd like, but these are the things you got to be thinking about, especially now going into next year. Pricing, understanding pricing. Now, this is going to be one of the factors that's going to dictate, your success almost more than anything else. And that is, what are you actually charging people? Do you understand your pricing model as it relates to gross margin, right? As it relates to all of your other costs, right? So in order to really be successful with your pricing model, you've got to sell value, not price. You can't win the price game. No one's going to win that game, right? Which means that in order to have premium pricing, and you do have to have premium pricing in order to thrive, not just survive, you've got to sell on value, because price isn't going to cut it. And in order to get value pricing, which is premium pricing, you've got to sell, and you've got to have a selling system in order to make that happen. There's no two ways about it. Home improvements need to be sold. Too many companies are out there bidding. Well, if you're bidding, you're not going to get the price you need to get in order for you to make the margins you need to get. Just not going to happen, right? Your minimum gross profit or gross profit margin should be 50%. And this is after material and labor. Ideally, you want it to be at 60%, right? So in order to make that work, you've got to understand your actual hard costs of material and labor. You've got to understand the multiplier that you need to apply to that. And then you've got to understand this concept of target price. Target price, very simply, it's a complicated subject, but very simply is, this is the number we cannot sell less than. Okay? That's target price. So when your people are out in the house selling, the minimum number is here. Okay? And then you've got to get everybody on your team around this idea that, hey, we're not about the price, we're about the value that we provide to our customer. So that when, how many companies do you hear about, Tim, where you say to them, look, you got to raise your price, and what do they tell you about their salespeople?
They say we can't raise our price because we won't sell as much.
Right. Who's saying that?
The salespeople are.
Salespeople.
Right.
Right. So there's way too many people out there that are allowing their salespeople to dictate what their price is. Well, yes. It doesn't work that way. Again, all of those people that I showed you in that slide where we got a lot of this information from, they don't let their salespeople dictate how much the price. This is the price, right? And by the way, it's going to go up in a month or two. It's going to go up, right? It is what it is. It's got to go up. Go out and sell value. Add more value to what we're doing. Run the system, and it will produce the results that it needs to produce.
Brian, a couple thoughts on pricing. We have a unique opportunity right now because of the current situation. And the opportunity is, now is the time for you to, for lack of a better term, normalize your pricing.
Yeah.
And get it right. Because our consumers right now expecting things to cost more? The answer is absolutely yes, because everything does.
Yeah.
So now's the time for you to get your price in order so you can grow your business. Probably the biggest reason I see people get stuck at those plateaus, Brian, they don't have any money to work with to get to the next level. They don't have marketing dollars, so they're just stuck. Think of it this way. Here's a little test you could do for yourself to convince yourself that maybe you can get more for your products. Think in your market area, who's selling the most stuff that you sell. In other words, a company that is just killing it, selling a whole bunch of stuff. And then ask yourself this question, or research this. Find out what they're charging for their product. And I will bet in almost every case, you'll find that these guys who are selling the most in your market area are the highest priced company in your market area. And you might think, well, how can that be? Those things seem to be opposites. You would think that if people are overcharging, because that's what many people think, they wouldn't sell as much. Not the case. And I'm not saying that the opportunity we have right now to get our price right and normalize our pricing, you really can't look at it as taking advantage of consumers right now. What you need to look at it as is getting your business in order and making sure you got things priced properly to set yourself up for growth if you want it, but also for those other things that are so important, that freedom that Brian mentioned and things such as that. Yeah. So pricing, the message on pricing in this particular online training might be the most important thing we're talking about here today, Brian.
Yeah.
Is getting people to consider this for 2022. At the event I was at last week, a lot of big companies there, some upwards of $80–100 million. They raised their prices multiple times over the last year. They yeah. just have. And you certainly can do that, and it won't affect your business at all unless you have salespeople that, I can't say it any other way, probably need to be fired.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And these are topics, by the way, all of these topics we go really deep on for 2 days at Accelerate in February. But let's keep going here. A marketing and selling model. So talk a little bit, Tim, talk a little bit about the first two, recalibrating your marketing and company focus on full funnel.
Yeah. When I mentioned recalibrate your marketing, what that is constantly being on guard to what's working, because things change, and maybe things that work in a given market with given economic situations might work differently 5-6 months from now. So constantly be looking at your lead sources, comparing it and knowing your numbers, and comparing it to really what you're getting for results from those things, and continue to recalibrate your marketing dollar spend and make sure you're putting in places that's going to get you business. And then secondly, does your company call or count on or focus on, I should say, what I call full funnel marketing? And what this is about is lead conversion. And of course, this could be a online training all by itself to spend on this. Because what I'm talking about here is everything related to generating a lead first off, then converting it to an appointment, and then converting an appointment to an issued lead that's given to a salesperson through confirmation processes, things such as that. And then converting that issued lead to a salesperson to a full demonstration or presentation, and then converting that full presentation to a sale, either now or in the future. And then you don't stop there. You take these customers you got and you replicate them by giving them that customer experience that Brian often talks about, to the point where they're great sources of reviews, repeat business, and referrals, which really are the great part of our business. So those are just things, a couple of things we can mention from the sales and selling model that are really important to consider right now. Recalibrate and make sure you are good at all the processes of your marketing and sales funnel.
Yeah. Now, one of the easiest shortcuts there is technology. And I think that we don't have a lot of time to go through everything, Tim. We're kind of coming up against the clock here, but you got to embrace the technology, and you got to look at everything that's out there and see, how do I just plug these things into my business? So if you don't have a CRM system, what are you waiting for? Sign up with Market Sharp. It's inexpensive, it's quick, it's already all been figured out. If you're not using presentation tools, if you're not using like a RoofSnap or Engage, some of these things take a little bit more to set up than others, but some of them are really pretty simple and straightforward. There's financing tools. There's just so many tools out there that you could use. Companies like G4 that'll do a whole section of your marketing for you, right? You've got to be open to this idea of technology. And again, you've got to be open to this idea of taking these shortcuts. So Tim, let's do this. We told everybody an hour. For those people that have to go, let's come back to this in a minute. We're going to show you a couple of tools that you guys could use to think about planning for next year. But we also want to make sure that we, let me just go through this here real quick. We'll come back to this. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that they are invited to Accelerate Live, happening in February, right here in Fort Lauderdale. The weather is generally beautiful at that time of year. This is our 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Actually, this is our 6th year putting on Accelerate. Market Sharp has been with us from day one. I have a biased opinion, but I really think it's really the premier event for home improvement business owners. This year, we are mixing things up a little bit. We're going to do a few new and fun things. But the real underlying, there's really two major things about this event. One is to help you make and keep more money. And two, design a business that works for you, that serves you and your family and provides you with the means to live your best life. That's the design of this thing. Everything that we do, every speaker we bring, every tool we introduce is all designed around these two things. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers this year. I have more speakers this year than I ever have before, just because there's so much going on and there's so much to learn from these people. The 5 people that I introduced you to before, they're all speaking at the event. We also, what I'm really excited about is we have 3 bonus day opportunities on the 17th, on that Thursday. One is Accelerate Your Sales with John Anglis. So it's a full day with John. Accelerate Your Growth Without Going Bankrupt and Losing Your Mind, which is the subtitle of that, with my good friend Charlie Gindel. And then Accelerate Your Customer Experience. Usually I do that one myself, but this year I, just because there's so much going to be going on, I'm bringing in Vance Morris. We call him the Disney guy. And he does an incredible presentation. He's going to take some of my stuff and his stuff, and it's going to be pretty cool. If you want to join us there, we would love to have you. Early bird tickets, we're at about 70%, 60 or 70% sold already. So our early bird discount is going away on Friday. If you use the code up there, which is Tim's code, Market Sharp's code, CRM22, you'll save $500 on your ticket, not $400, which is the early bird. You'll save an additional $100, but that price is going up on Saturday, I believe. We have to. Just because of the logistics of the hotels and all of that. So if you use code CRM22, that's in that, Valerie will put the link to the website, and you can get all of the information there. So with that, Tim, let's go back now to our planning tools for everybody that is still here with us. Cool, most everybody is still here.
Brian, can I just say something about the event you just described?
Sure.
Yeah, we've been there since the beginning, and it really is one of the best events in the industry, and it's great. So if you like anything we're talking about here today, you know, what you're going to get there is this on steroids, you know, so it's going to be awesome. But here's the deal. Talking about shortcuts, Brian, which is kind of the theme of our session here today, probably one of the biggest shortcuts that I've seen companies have is the ones that attend events.
Yeah.
When I go to events, who do I see there? I see the most successful companies in the country.
Yep.
Over and over and over again. They continue to go for a reason, because they're rubbing shoulders with other people that are doing the same thing they're doing. They're learning from them. They're learning from the speakers in the front of the room. I know it's a huge temptation to say, we can't get there, we're too busy. But these are the things you need for your business. So just thought I'd go and give a plug to the event there, Brian. I'm totally a believer in these events, and they really transform people's businesses.
You talk about clues, Tim. So speaking of events, so he's, you know, Tim's absolutely right. And whether you go to my event or you go to another event, it's, you know, look, just get out there. The power is in not only what's happening on the stage, but power is also what happens in the hallways, in the breaks, at lunch, at breakfast. I mean, we do breakfast, we do lunch. We do that, and we do a cocktail hour. We do that on purpose, because not only because we want to give you a first-class experience and we want to feed you, but we want you to meet new people. We want you to learn from other people. And just real quick, Tim, I shouldn't be shocked, but you know, the whole thing about success leaving clues, that is one of the biggest clues. When we were at the Top 500 event last month, I think, or a couple months ago in New Orleans, I was the second to last speaker. Now, for anybody that was there, and Tim knows this, day one, first session, the room was packed. It was standing room only. By lunchtime, I don't know where everybody went, but it wasn't packed anymore. It was, I don't know, 60% maybe. By the end of the first day, it was maybe half of those people. Then the next day, by the time it got to the end, to me, it was maybe 30% of the people from the day before. But who was in the room? I'm looking across, and in one row, I see a company that was sold a couple years ago for $90 million. I see the owners sitting there. Next, in the row in front of them was a company that this year is going to do like 80 to 100 million. Next to them was my buddy Mark Curry. Who could teach that? Who could teach the whole thing for 2 days? Anyway, so what Tim just said is, I mean, it's absolutely right. Do what you have to do. Again, if you come to mind, great. I would love to have you. But if you can't make it to mine, go to somebody else, but get out to events. They're super powerful. All right. So one of the things I talk about in my book, The 7 Secrets to Becoming a Wealthy Contractor, right up front is this whole idea of what is it that you want? Okay. And I like to think about it from the point of view of, well, what do you want to, how much money do you want to make? And then what does a business need to look like in order for you to achieve that result? And so I created this tool. It's called a couple of, depending on where you get it from, but in the book, it's called the reverse engineering worksheet. So basically it's a simple concept where it says, okay, let's figure out how much money we want to make, why we want to make that, and then figure out what does the business need to look like in order for me to achieve that result. So just real quickly, I'm going to walk you through this. This is something you can get, just request it from us, or if you have a copy of the 7 Secrets book, you will have this worksheet. So when you think about, okay, well, how much money do I want to make? Okay, so let's say that you want to make $300,000 next year. All right. And again, keep in mind, the business is very predictable. There's formulas to the business. And we're going to take this and put it on steroids in just a minute with a tool that Tim created. But here's what I always say. Why do you want to make that number? Again, the number doesn't matter. Everybody on this call, everybody's number is different. Okay. The number itself does not matter. It only matters to you. But why? Why do you want that number? You got to make it real. Like you got to feel it in here. Okay. I want to send my kids to private school, or I got to create a college fund, or I want to create, or I want to take my family on a beautiful vacation, or whatever it is, a bigger house, a nicer house, whatever it is. Why do you want that number? Then we say, okay, well, what is the profit model you want to achieve? So like I said, you could do 15%, you can do 20%. Okay, these are the 2 examples I've got here. You can do 12% if that's what you want. Okay, but if you do 20%, that means that in order to make $300,000, you've got to install and collect $1.5 million. Okay, that's at a 20% profit, $1.5 million. Now, I'm going to confuse things a little bit. I'm going to put them in red just so you see how this works. But let's say that you say, well, Brian, I don't think I'm ready to do 20%, but I can do 15. Great. So then you multiply that number by 6.7, and that's going to give you $2 million. Okay. So in order to make the 300 on a 15% model, you need to sell $200,000. All right. Now, in order to do this, we have to determine, well, how many salespeople are we going to need to make that happen? Now, I use the number of 750. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why, okay? But it's a good basis number for you to start thinking. So in this case, you would need 2 or 3 salespeople, right? Next is, what is your job average? What is the job average? And to keep the math simple, I'm going to say $10,000. So when we take these numbers and we divide it by 10, we get, okay, we have to complete and collect 150 jobs, sell, complete, collect on 150 jobs on a 20% model, or 200 on your 15% model. Okay. Now, the last thing we need is we need to know, okay, well, how many leads do we need to create? How many issued leads, appointments? So if we say our close rate is say 33%, 1/3, in our 20% model, we need 454 leads, appointments, issued leads, or in the other model, we need 606. Now, when we go to plan for this, we can break this down. We live, we talk about living in a 90-day world. We live by quarters, okay, in our company. And so we take our numbers, and a lot of my clients do the same thing, by the way. We work on 13 weeks. So if our goal is to do, let's say, $2 million, what are we going to do in the first quarter? Well, we're going to do, say, $500,000 the first quarter. Well, what does that look like week by week? Okay. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Is this model perfect? No, it is not. But it's a starting point. It gives you an idea of, well, what does my business kind of have to look like in order to make that profit happen in my business? Now, with this information, you could start to make some decisions, okay? And then with this information, now you can create a plan. Now, Tim has an amazing, amazing tool for this that he created many, many years ago. And Tim, I think you want to show them how this works and talk to them about this. But
Yeah.
But one, before you get into it, when you talk about the people that are the most successful in this business, they plan and they plan and they plan, and then they work that plan. And I know you've heard this before, create a plan, work, whatever the hell it is, but it's real. Okay. So Tim, go ahead and share this, and then we're going to make this available. I'm actually going to put it in the chat while Tim is sharing it.
All right, we'll do this quickly because I know we've held you a little bit long, but hopefully the information is worth it to you. I love what you just did on the prior screen, Brian. What you did is you began where? You began with profit, didn't you? And that is so important to do that. Many people have probably read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Probably one of the most famous books on, I guess, business ever. And if you haven't read the book, I would suggest it because it's got a ton of wisdom in there. But one of the things, and one of the 7 habits, or one of the things that's so important is begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you've just done on the previous slide, is you began with that end in mind that, hey, $300,000 is what I'd love to have at the end of the year. So let's go ahead and take it from there. So I'm going to share this spreadsheet briefly. Let's see, Brian. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Okay, Brian, are we seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. So briefly, what's going on here? This is a collection of a bunch of different worksheets within the spreadsheet. You don't have to be a geek to use this thing. It's extremely
Super simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has all the instructions right here. And it begins with an annual breakdown here. So I'm going to click on that. It takes you to a screen that kind of jumps off where Brian was just at. Okay, how much revenue do we need to achieve that profit goal? Remember, we began the session by saying, revenue really isn't what we got to focus on. Well, we just focused on a bunch of stuff before the conversation finally got around to revenue here.
Yeah.
But once you know what your profit goal is, it can then be converted to revenue, as Brian did on the previous worksheet. So let's say our goal here is $4.7 million. And it's going to ask you a few more questions. What's cool about this is you only got to answer like 7 questions here. And the spreadsheet continues from here and lays out your plan for 2022. One question is, how much do you want to budget for your marketing and advertising budget? I think 10% is a good number to shoot for. Some people are able to achieve numbers lower than that. Many people are higher than that. So you know what your business is like, put a number in there that makes sense for you. What your average sale is. What's your closing percentages on demoed leads? And what % of your appointments that you set never get run? In other words, they fall through. And then what % of your sales you get are actually canceled or finances rejected or things such as that. Then you put in the number of salespeople you got, and things get calculated below automatically for you. So what's going on here is your goal is 4.7 million, but remember 5% of it is going to fall through with cancellation. So you're installing 4.5 million. But here's where it gets fun. Here's the number of jobs you got to get next year, 564. Here's the number of jobs per week. How many qualified leads you need based on closing ratio to pull this off? How many per week? How many per day? Number of leads each salesperson will run per week, per day. How much money you're setting aside for your marketing based on that 10% figure is right here. And based on installed sales, that number actually moves to 11% because you had some cancellation. And here's what's neat. It's giving you a projection of how much you're going to spend per lead. And what I think we need to focus on, Brian, is this is an important number to know how much your lead cost is.
Critical.
But really what matters to you more than that is how much your sales cost is. Because that's really what matters.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a lead cost that's X, but if none of those leads are converting, you know, it's really not doing you very, very much good. So keep a monitor and pull numbers out of your CRM of what your costs are per lead and per sale. So just by putting in these numbers here, as you can see here, if we make changes to these numbers, let's change this to $5 million. And you see the numbers down here will just shift to reflect that. So easy. But then things get very fun. You go back to the main page and you go to monthly budget breakdown. And here's where you can go ahead and put in a percent of how much business you'll think you'll get in a given month. Because depending on your product type, it's simply not a division by 12 usually. So you're going to say, okay, in January, we expect 6% of our yearly revenue to be gotten then. So put those numbers in there. And what the spreadsheet does is recalculate how many leads you need that month, how many sales you need that month, what your marketing budget is that month, and of course, what your sales goal is for that month. And here's where it gets fun. You got $30,000 to spend this month. Come down here and spend it. And lay out your plan down here with what you're going to do with all your marketing elements to get this amount of business. And you can do things like put little notes in each cell of, okay, for shows and events, this is what our plan is. And you can go ahead and put it in there and lay out your plan right there. So pretty neat that you can just base this off of your revenue goal. And now you come down here and figure out where you're going to intelligently spend your marketing dollars to help pull this off. So once you do that, you get your months figured out for your whole year, back to the main page. And then when the month is over, guess what you do? You come back and put in not your budget anymore, but your actual expenditures. What did you spend on these marketing sources that you planned to spend X amount of dollars on? So you go ahead and put the real numbers in there as they took place that month. And then you come back here and you can go to budget versus actual. And what you got going on here is you got your budget. This is what our goal was, 300,000. Guess what? We got a little better. This is what our marketing budget was, 30,000. Guess what? We actually spent a little less. And what it's doing is it's telling you really what's going on here in your business. And once you start using this spreadsheet month after month, year after year, you start learning some trends that are going on that can truly help you immensely as your business continues to grow. Then you also have these monthly planners here. So every month you can come in here. It's calculating your sales goal, how many leads you need and all that. And in here, you just simply go ahead and put in what you're going to do. What are your strategies? Down here, put in what are your tactics to help you achieve your strategies. So really all this little spreadsheet tool is, Brian, is something to hold someone's hand so they just don't wing it.
Right.
Because what happens is you might have that goal for the month, but you just hope that it happens.
you know, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is, I'll take back the screen now, Tim.
Yes.
I put by the way, I dropped this into the chat. So anybody that wants it, you can just go and grab it from the chat. Powerful tool. Hold on. What happened? Oops.
I got to stop share, Brian.
Okay. So really powerful. And again, when you're talking about, you know, what does it take to really make it in this business, really in any business, it's planning, it's understanding the numbers, it's understanding what drives, and what are you focused on? What are you focused on? So I was having a conversation. I know we're going a little bit over, but I think this will be real instructive, because a lot of people say, well, Brian, but where am I going to get the time? I'm running around, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Listen, I get it. Everybody's busy. You got to carve out the time. You got to look at, and this is another thing we talk about at Accelerate. How do you find the time? How do you actually get this stuff done? How do you actually implement? And we're actually going to have a panel of people that over the last 3 or 4 years have just implemented. And I want to know what they did. How did they do it? Right. So we'll go through step by step with these 4 people and say, well, you know, what did you do? How did you actually get this done? What you will see with them is that you have to get rid of stuff that you shouldn't be doing so you could focus on the things that you should be doing. Because when you have focus, okay, when you have focus, that's what's going to drive your results. So I was having a conversation. Oh, access was denied. Okay, I'll fix that.
Brian, let me just say this too.
Yeah.
If people have any trouble getting a spreadsheet from that
Yeah.
mechanism, just send me an email at tim@marketsharp.com and request the planning spreadsheet, and I'll get it right back to you. So again, tim@marketsharp.com.
I just put it in the chat.
Great.
I just put it in the chat. So I had a conversation with a husband and wife team, their clients, and they had some trouble this year. They're in the siding business, and they had some stuff go wrong, and they know all the basics. They understand the profitability. They understand their pricing model. Now a lot of this stuff happened before that, and so so basically the conversation was, how do you get some money in the bank so you could be positive, so you can turn around the situation that they were in. The beauty of this business is within 8 weeks, you can have cash coming into the business, and you can turn this around very, very quickly. But essentially what we figured out was, hey, you got to sell this many jobs a week. In order to sell this many jobs a week, you've got to create this many leads. And so I told them, your entire focus, because you've got your pricing down right, you've got your profit model down right, you've got production that's ready to go. What you've really now just got to stay focused on is, how do we create the leads that we need in order to sell the number of jobs that we need to sell? And so when you've got these information, you wake up every day knowing exactly what you need to do. And you're focused. And the power of focus is undeniable, is absolutely undeniable, the power of focus. So any questions for me and Tim? I'm going to put up a poll here. We're going to ask you about Accelerate. If anybody's interested in going, you may have already gone to the website and bought a ticket, but if you haven't, and you want to, let us know. You'll get Tim's discount, which is awesome. And again, on Friday, the prices are going up. But anybody have any questions? Mindy's already registered. Awesome. Be great to see you again. Questions. Let me go to Q&A. No questions, huh? You got both of us. You got me and Tim here.
I think we wore them out, Brian.
You think we wore them out?
I do.
I'm sorry if we did that.
Yeah.
We had to get through a lot of information, and we were I think we're a little optimistic about how much information we can get done in an hour. But that's me and Tim, though. Me and Tim, Tim always over delivers. Always over delivers. And I hope I hope that the same can be said about what we do here at the Wealthy Contractor. All right, so I'm going to shut this poll down. By the way, anybody want information about Market Sharp? I'm going to launch another poll here. If you don't have Market Sharp already in your business, what are you waiting for? So I put that up there. Few people, great. Great. Yeah. Tim, what is, well, no, never mind. That'll be a whole nother conversation. And like you said, I think we've warned everybody, but I'll tell you what, most everybody's still here. Most everybody is still here. Some people have dropped off, and, you know, hopefully, you know, this has been, obviously it's been valuable to a majority of the people, enough for them to hang out with us a little bit longer. All right, cool. So we'll shut this down. And let's see, we already went through this. We went through this. Oh, those flames, look at those flames. They just keep going. It's on fire.
Brian, did you see the request for a suggestion on how to raise capital?
Yes, I didn't see it, but now I do. Here's how you raise capital. I'm not sure of what your situation is, but go sell more, make profit. Raising capital, I'm not sure of what size business you're in. You want to give me an idea of the size of your business, Mark? Because there is a lot of, okay, at your size, Mark, you need to just go sell more. There's no raising capital. Everyone, by the way, all of those people that I showed you at the beginning, those 5 people that I showed you where it said success leaves clues, every single one of them has built their company on cash flow. Every single one. And I'll tell you, there aren't a whole lot of people that are at the size of business where you are, that are out looking for capital. You should not need capital. You should be able to do it entirely through cash flow. And I'm going to tell you from experience, okay? Part of the reason why I lost everything was because I didn't follow that advice that I just gave you. I went looking for capital, couldn't get capital, and instead put debt into a company and ended up losing everything because of it. The best way to grow your business, especially at your level, again, is through selling. Go sell at the right price with the right profit model, make enough money to where you can, yeah. The other thing too, for everybody, is that it's all about process. And again, we talk about this at Accelerate, but it's about process. It's about system. Nobody's going to give you money. No one's going to buy your business. Someone's going to invest in your business if you can't demonstrate to them a consistent flow of leads and how you're getting them. And it can't just be one source either. You got to have 10 or 12. A consistent, reliable way that you're converting those leads into sales. A consistent, reliable production team that is getting the work installed and getting 5-star reviews. No one's going to give you anything. So I hope that helps. All right. So no more questions. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. And some of you will see at Accelerate. If you need anything from me and Tim, just reach out. We will send a follow-up email after this, but thank you all. See you later. Bye,
Thanks,
Tim.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.